There is a silence beneath the silence, not the quiet that comes when the world sleeps, but the kind that hums beneath thought, beneath behavior, beneath the masks we wear for love, for survival. It is the hush of repression, of something driven underground so long ago that it has become the very soil we stand on. We like to believe we live on the surface of our decisions, that our actions arise cleanly from what we want, what we believe. But there is a vast substructure beneath our will, a murk of long-buried hurts, disowned hungers, compromises so old they've become invisible. And when we suffer, without understanding why, when we sabotage what we love or flee, what we needed is here, that the answer lies. The unconscious does not forget. It waits. It distorts. It dreams. It does not speak our language, yet it speaks in everything we do. A glance we avert, a voice that trembles, a dream we deny. It is the child left unheard, the wound that shaped the architecture of the self. And until we descend to meet it, we are not truly free. Pain that is not faced is not erased. It is rerouted. Turned inward, it becomes guilt. Outward, it becomes blame. Disguised, it wears the mask of cynicism, of numbness, of control. We call it character. We call it strength. But what if it is only defense? We were not born closed. We were not born split. That fracture came later, when something unbearable had to be born. So we buried it. And in burying it, we buried part of ourselves. There is no healing without remembering, no liberation without confrontation. And yet, who wants to remember what once had to be forgotten to survive? Repression is not forgetting. It is active. It is a constant expenditure of psychic energy to not know what we know. It is the body held tight for decades, the breath never fully exhaled. It is a life built around a void, and the tragedy is, we grow attached to this void. It becomes our identity. To face the void is to risk annihilation, or so it seems. In truth, it is the beginning of rebirth. You do not need to be ready. You will never be ready. The unconscious does not wait for readiness. It breaks through in symptoms, in dreams, in those moments when the mask slips and we feel the rawness of being. Grief you cannot name, anger that has no source, longing that shames you. These are not defects. They are messages. The unconscious cries out not to ruin you, but to reunite you with what you lost, yourself. But the self is not a unity. It is a battleground. Within us, the child who still hopes, the critic who attacks, the parent we internalized, the exile we abandoned. They war in silence. They shape every choice we make. And when their voices grow too loud, we drown them in noise, in consumption, in performance. But silence returns. It always returns. Do not flee it. Enter it. Do not resist your weakness. Study it. Trace its shape. What we call weakness is often a scare, and scars are evidence of survival. They show where we once broke, and in breaking, lived. The psyche is not fragile. It is layered. It is guarded because it has known pain. But its defenses, once useful, become prisons. To live freely is to risk the collapse of those walls, to touch what lies beneath them, the forgotten sorrow, the primal terror, the helplessness that once felt fatal. But you are not that child anymore. You have what they did not: time, language, reflection. the capacity to suffer consciously, to metabolize pain into understanding, and in doing so, to liberate energy once trapped in the labor of forgetting. Every symptom is a cipher. Anxiety is often the price we pay to keep truths buried. Depression, a mourning without a grave. Addiction, an attempt to flee a presence too painful to face. These are not enemies. They are thresholds. Cross them. It will not be clean. The unconscious is not a file cabinet to be sorted, but a dreamscape. Symbols and shadows, contradictions. Here, opposites coexist. You may love what harmed you. You may hate what saved you. And that is not failure. That is the truth of psyche. We do not resolve the unconscious. We learn to relate to it, to listen, to be altered by it. In therapy, in reflection, in solitude, a new ethic arises. Not to judge the self, but to understand it. Not to conquer the void, but to speak from within it. There, in the depths, you will find not a monster, but a memory. Not madness, but meaning. Not shame, but history. You were shaped by forces you did not choose, but in facing them, you choose again. This is the task, to walk back through the dream, to exhume the silence, to grieve what was lost, to reclaim what was buried, to speak, at last, what had to be hidden. Not for catharsis, not for drama, but for truth. And in truth, there is a kind of peace, not the peace of escape, but of presence, of no longer having to pretend. The unconscious will never be fully mapped, but it can be respected, it can be heard. And when it is, when its signals are no longer feared, but followed, strange alchemy begins. What once threatened to destroy you becomes your compass. What once was pain becomes power. What once was void becomes voice. This is not the end. This is the beginning. But beginnings are deceptive. They do not thunder into being. They whisper. They creep. They arrive not with clarity, but with disorientation. When you first face the void, you will not be met with light. You will meet confusion, a dissolving of the familiar, the collapse of certainties you once mistook for truth. This is not regression. This is regression in the service of the Agoa descent with purpose, a controlled disintegration, not into chaos, but into origin. Because every adult carries the child they once were, not in memory alone, but in posture, in pattern, in the private logic that binds them to suffering. The child who was silenced does not disappear. They hide. They repeat. They wait for you to become the adult they needed. And most never do. Most keep fleeing into competence, into roles, into busyness. They build lives as fortresses against the return of feeling, and they succeed until they don't, until the body revolts, until the dream becomes unbearable, until the ache breaks through the armor. Symptoms are not malfunctions. They are signals. They are the psyche's last language when all others have failed. Listen, there is no neutral place inside, no ground untouched by what came before. We are born into dependency, into need, into a world that cannot always meet us with tenderness. And so we adapt. We fracture. We split off the parts that jeopardize love or invite rejection. This is how neurosis begins. Not as illness, but as adaptation. A way to stay connected when the truth is too dangerous. A way to preserve love, even if it means abandoning the self. The child learns. It is better to be false and accepted than true and alone. But the cost accumulates, and in adulthood, that false self becomes a cage. You feel it when your voice trembles for no reason, when your joy feels like an act, when your sadness has no name, when intimacy terrifies you more than solitude. You feel it when you betray yourself and feel relief. This is not weakness. It is a trauma response. The compulsion to repeat is not madness. It is the psyche's attempt to resolve what was never resolved, to master what was once survived through submission. So we return again and again to the same dynamics. Different faces, same wound. A loop of unconscious loyalty to pain. But the loop can be broken. Not by willpower, not by denial, but by integration. The slow, painful stitching together of the dissociated self, the grieving of what should have been, the reparenting of the inner orphan, the acceptance that no rescue is coming, and that you are now the one responsible for your own repair. This is not romantic. It is not easy. It is holy work, and it begins in the dark. The unconscious is not content to be ignored. It demands to be heard, through dreams, through compulsions, through the subtle, inexorable pull toward what wounds us, not to destroy us, but to show us where we have not yet healed. You must learn its language, symbols, fantasies, irrational fears. These are not nonsense. They are metaphors. The psyche speaks in symbols because it had to. There was a time when it was not safe to speak plainly. So it learned poetry. It learned disguise. And in doing so, it buried truth under metaphor. Your task is not to dismiss these symbols, but to decipher them. To understand why your dreams chase you through empty houses. Why your fears arrive wrapped in absurdity. Why your fantasies hum with contradiction. You are not mad. You are communicating with yourself in the only language available to the wounded child. And this language, while strange, is faithful. It repeats until it is heard. So listen. When you feel envy, trace its shape. It points to a part of you you have disowned. When you feel shame, ask, whose voice is this? Is it mine or inherited? When you feel dread, sit with it. Beneath dread is grief. Beneath grief is truth. And truth, though it wounds, is the only thing that can set you free. But freedom is not bliss. It is responsibility. To become conscious is to lose the comfort of blame. It is to realize that what was done to you is not your fault, but what you do with it is your task. No one will live your unlived life for you. No one will walk into the void in your place. And if you refuse the call, it will haunt you. The unlived life festers. The denied truth becomes symptom. The postponed grief becomes pathology. So begin. Not when it is easy. Not when you are certain. But now. Sit with the silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of encounter. The quiet that comes when there is nothing left to distract you. That is where the work begins. Let the memory rise. Let the old feeling return. Let the tears you never cried come. They will not kill you. They are already inside you. All you are doing is letting them speak. And in the speaking, something changes. Not quickly, not all at once, but irrevocably. You begin to recognize yourself. Not the self you performed, but the one who watched from behind your eyes all these years. The one who remembers. The one who endured. The one who, even in silence, never stops speaking. And that voice, fragile as it is, will guide you. You do not need to become someone new. You need to reclaim what was abandoned. You need to welcome back the exiles of your own soul, the rage, the sorrow, the tenderness, the terror, all of it. What you repress does not die. It waits. It becomes your shadow. And only by facing that shadow, inviting it into the light, do you become whole. Wholeness is not perfection. It is contradiction held consciously. You are not here to transcend your humanity. You are here to live it deeply, fully, painfully. You are not broken. You are complex. Your suffering is not a mistake. It is a signal. Answer it. To answer suffering is not to fix it, not to rush it into silence or push it toward resolution. That instincto tidy, to complete, to sanitize ice itself part of the defense, a wish to make the unbearable neat. But the psyche does not obey our timelines. It unfolds. It circles. It returns again and again to the same wound, not out of cruelty, but because healing is not linear. It is recursive. It moves like grief outward, inward, back again. You will tire. You will rage. You will beg it to stop. And still, it will return. Because the self you buried so long ago does not want to be erased. It wants to be found. Not rewritten, but witnessed. The mind is a house of many rooms. Some you know, some you have never entered, but they are yours. And each locked door is a part of your truth. You may fear what lies behind them, but they are already shaping your life. You cannot hide from what you are. So open the door, inside. The memory you never told anyone. The moment your body froze. The word that changed your nervous system. The silence that swallowed you whole. It is not too late. No matter how long it has been ignored, the unconscious remembers. Not in dates or details, but in tensions, in compulsions, in the logic of dreams, in the way you flinch when someone loves you too well. And it is in those moments that your task is clearest, to stay, to resist the urge to escape into performance, or control, or superiority, to sit with the discomfort, to listen for what it is asking, not demanding, but needing. Because the truth is, most of your life has been lived in reaction to what you could not feel. And now you are being asked to feel it. The nervous system remembers what the mind cannot. Your anxiety is not random. It is a response, a trace, a relic of a time when safety was unpredictable. Your body is not betraying you. It is protecting you from a danger that may no longer exist, but which once shaped your reality. So do not punish your fear. Sit beside it. Ask it. When did you first appear? What are you guarding me from? Let the answers come slowly. They will not arrive in words, but in impressions, fragments, sensations. This is the language of the unconscious. It is not logical, but it is precise. You may cry without knowing why. Trust that. You may remember something you thought forgotten. Follow that. You may rage at something small, something stupid. Look closer. Beneath the surface, meaning waits. Healing is not release it, is encounter. To be healed does not mean to feel nothing. It means to feel fully and survive. It means to let what once overwhelmed you move through, without defense, without shame. This is not weakness. It is the rarest kind of strength, vulnerability in the face of memory. The courage to say I am not who I pretended to be. I am deeper. I am darker. I am more complicated than anyone ever saw. And that depth, that darkness, it is not pathology. It is humanity. We live in a culture that rewards control, not truth, that praises detachment and calls it maturity, that pathologizes pain instead of listening to it. And so we perform our way through life dissociated from our own experience, rewarded for our ability to suppress. But the unconscious does not care about appearances. It wants only one thing: integration. It is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to become whole. Wholeness means you can grieve and still love. You can rage and still care. You can doubt and still belong. There is no part of you unworthy of attention, no emotion too messy, no wound too old. What matters is not when it happened, but that it shaped you, that it shaped the choices you make, the love you accept, the voice you silence. And now finally you are listening. This work is not done in public. It happens in the stillness of night, in the tears you don't explain, in the memories that rise when the noise fades. It is a quiet revolution, a reclamation of what was once abandoned to survive. And when you do this, when you tend to the forgotten part, something in you softens. Your reactivity lessens. Your compulsions lose their edge. You begin to choose instead of reenact. You begin to live instead of perform. Not perfectly, but authentically. The wounds do not vanish, but they cease to define you. They become your teachers, not your jailers. So stay with it. Stay through the numbness, the confusion, the rage. Stay through the grief that comes in waves, uninvited. Stay through the temptation to retreat into certainty or blame. This work will not give you control, but it will give you clarity. It will not erase your past, but it will release its grip on your future. Because once you walk into the void and keep walking, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing the unknown. You stop avoiding the silence. You stop needing to be perfect, or loved, or healed to be worthy. You learn to sit inside contradiction. You learn to make peace with your shadow. You learn to speak calmly and clearly from within the storm. And that voice, your true voice, arises. Not loud, not triumphant, but real. And realness, in a world of masks, is its own revolution. We speak often of the soul, of spirit, of essence, but few dare to name the real tyrant that rules within the superego. It whispers not with wisdom, but with judgment. A voice internalized so early, so seamlessly, we forget it was ever foreign. It sounds like conscience, like morality, like reason. But it is not reason, it is residue. The echo of the gaze that first made you feel unworthy. It tells you to do more, to be better, to not feel too much, to not need too much. It disguises itself as discipline, as high standards, but beneath its commands lies a single premise. You are not enough, and you believe it, because to challenge it feels like betrayal. To question it feels like danger. It was born in the same crucible as love, the early love that was conditional, inconsistent, or withheld. The love that taught you to be accepted, you must abandon part of yourself. And so the superego was born not as an enemy, but as a survival strategy. It kept you safe. It helped you adapt. It made you pleasing, productive, praised. But now, it keeps you imprisoned. It punishes joy. It crushes spontaneity. It keeps the body clenched, the breath shallow, the life narrow. And yet, we mistake its voice for truth. We think the shame it spreads is ours. We think the guilt is proof of virtue. But shame is not virtue. Shame is a leash. There is a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am the mistake. And shame, once rooted, grows silently. It wraps around the psyche like ivy, twisting every thought, every choice. You stop taking risks, not because you fear failure, but because you believe you deserve it. You silence your desire. Not because it is wrong, but because you've been told it is dangerous. And so many of your dreams remain unborn, not from laziness, but from inherited condemnation. You do not need more motivation. You need less shame. To heal the superego is not to silence conscience. It is to separate the voice of care from the voice of cruelty. To ask, when you hear that scolding echo, whose voice is this? Whose gaze am I still performing for? Because your inner critic did not arise in isolation. It has a history. And if you trace it, you will find its origin not in your failure, but in someone else's fear. Their pain, their own suppressed self, projected onto you. You were never the problem. You were the scapegoat for an adult who could not hold your truth. And now, you hold their voice inside you as if it were sacred. It is not. It is time to disobey. Disobedience, in the psychological sense, is liberation. It means reclaiming authority over your own meaning. It means allowing yourself to feel what you feel even when that feeling is rage at the very people you once worshipped. It means allowing contradiction. You can love someone and acknowledge their harm. You can honor your past and outgrow its lessons. You can be grateful and still demand more. To grow is not to abandon the past, but to revise its power. Because what happened to you cannot be undone, but its dominion over you can be. And for that, you must risk clarity. Clarity about what was done. Clarity about what was denied. Clarity about what you needed and never received. This clarity is not cruel. It is not blame. It is sight. It is the end of gaslighting yourself. You begin to say, yes, it hurt. Yes, I adapted. Yes, I survived. But survival is not enough anymore. Now you must live. And to live to truly live, you must give up the fantasy of return. The unconscious wish that one day, finally, someone will come back to rescue you, to apologize, to see you. No one is coming. The closure you crave will not come from them. It must come from you. You must become the one who sees, the one who listens, the one who says, I believe you. You didn't imagine it. You didn't ask for it. You didn't deserve it. And in that act of self-witnessing, something ancient shifts. You are no longer the child begging at a closed door. You are the adult with the key. There is grief in this. Of course there is. Grief for what was lost. Grief for what never was. Grief for the years spent in exile from your own life. But do not fear that grief. It is the beginning of presence. To grieve is to return to yourself, to stop performing and start feeling, to stop pretending and start remembering. And in that return, a strange thing happens. You begin to feel your own soul again, not as idea, but as sensation. The quiet knowing that you are real. You are here. You are no longer hiding. And this realness, this naked self, this core was never broken. It was buried beneath the shame, beneath the adaptation, beneath the noise. It has always waited, not for perfection, not for success, but for truth. For you to tell the story you were not allowed to tell, to speak the name of what shaped you, to stop carrying what was never yours. And then, only then, you begin to feel something else rising beneath the rubble. Not certainty, not ecstasy, but strength. A quiet, rooted strength. The kind that does not need to prove itself, because it knows it has survived. And survival, once conscious, becomes power. Desire is not innocent. It is not clean. It is not simple. It is not safe. Desire is the trembling thread that runs through the psyche, pulsing with longing, haunted by prohibition. And we do not simply want, we want against what we were told we could not have, against the voice that called our hunger shame, against the threat of abandonment. So desire, in its raw form, becomes unbearable. We bury it. We disguise it. We distort it into acceptable forms. We call it ambition. We call it romance. We call it art. But often, it is none of these. It is the child reaching out, still reaching, hoping that maybe this time someone will answer. Repression is not the death of desire. It is its deformation. What we cannot allow ourselves to want, we begin to fear. What we are told is dangerous, we feel as danger. And so the very thing that could make us whole becomes the thing we avoid. You say you want love, but do you? Or do you fear what love will awaken? You say you want truth, but do you? Or do you fear what you'll lose if truth means rupture? This is the heart of psychic conflict. We want what we fear, and we fear what we want. The unconscious does not resolve this tension. It sustains it. It encodes it. And that is why our desires so often arrive in disguise through dreams, through jokes, through slips of the tongue, through fantasies we cannot admit. The ego censors. But the unconscious does not forget, and so it speaks. A dream of an open door. A crush you cannot explain. A shame that clings to your joy. Listen, something ancient is trying to reach you. You were not born ashamed of your needs. You were made to feel shame for needing. Maybe your desire was too loud, too inconvenient. Maybe it asked too much of someone who had nothing to give. Maybe it reminded them of their own suffocated longing. So they taught you. Want less, smile more, stay quiet. And you learned. You dulled your hunger. You folded your voice. You made yourself small, palatable, manageable. And the world praised you for it. They called you easy, mature, strong. But inside, something starved. That starvation becomes neurosis. That self-abandonment becomes the seed of every compromise you do not understand. You wonder why you tolerate what hurts, why you crave what wounds, why you run from what you claim to seek. The answer lies here in the split between what you were allowed to want and what you truly need. And to heal that split, you must commit the most dangerous act. You must want again. Wanting is dangerous because it makes you vulnerable. It makes you visible. It makes you real. But there is no life without desire. Desire is not a flaw. Desire is your compass. It points to where you are most alive. and where you are most afraid. Do not ignore it. Do not dress it up in spiritual abstractions. Do not make it perform for respectability. Let it speak in its own voice. Let it be wild. Let it contradict. Let it burn. This is not indulgence. This is analysis. You must feel your hunger in order to know what you've lost, and you have lost a great deal. The false self was built on that loss, a persona constructed to survive in a world that did not welcome your depth. It is not fake. It is not evil, but it is partial. It is a mask you grew into until you forgot it was a mask. The false self smiles when it should rage, nods when it should tremble, performs safety while screaming silently beneath the skin. It is an actor, a role, a perfected defense. But even the best performance cannot nourish you. There comes a time when the false self begins to crack, sometimes through crisis, sometimes through fatigue, a panic attack, a breakup, a strange dream, a sudden feeling of emptiness. That is the call to descend, not to become someone else, but to finally stop pretending, to meet the real self, not the idealized image, but the flawed, longing, feral core. It will not be pretty, it will not be polite, but it will be you. And for the first time, your reflection may no longer provoke disgust but recognition, because beneath the act, beneath the shame, beneath the fear, there is a presence that has waited without bitterness. It has endured exile. It has watched as you disowned it again and again, and still it has never left. That is your power. Your power is not in your perfection, not in your insight, not in your self-improvement. Your power is in your willingness to turn toward what you abandoned, to kneel beside it, to let it speak, to hold the trembling parts you once disavowed. This is not regression. This is return. A return to what was lost, to what you once were, before you were told you had to choose between love and truth, between belonging and authenticity, between safety and desire. You no longer have to choose. The work is not to destroy the false self. It is to release it, to thank it for the years it kept you alive, and to let it go, like a skin that has outlived its use. You will be raw beneath it. Of course you will. But rawness is not weakness. It is aliveness. It is feeling at last without armor. And when you feel this deeply, you begin to see others differently. Not as threats, not as saviors, but as fellow exiles, fellow returners, fellow survivors of the same unspoken war. Then you do not just reclaim yourself. You reclaim your humanity. You have walked through the ruins. You have opened the doors others warned you to keep sealed. You have met the parts of yourself no one else wanted to see. You have held your own sorrow like a child. And now, you stand not in certainty, but in truth. There is no triumph here, no grand revelation. Only this: you are still here, breathing, bleeding, becoming. This is not redemption. This is recognition. You were never broken, only divided. You were never lost, only buried. And now, slowly, steadily, you begin to return to the body that remembers, to the voice that was silenced, to the story you were never allowed to tell. The world will not thank you for this. It does not reward those who choose wholeness over compliance. It does not celebrate the ones who dismantle the masks and speak from the wound. But that's no longer why you speak. You speak because silence costs too much. You speak because truth, once touched, demands to be lived. because there is no going back to sleep once the soul has opened its eyes. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to justify the shape of your grief. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be real. And realness is quiet. It does not perform. It does not prove. It simply is. It shows up again and again, even when the voice shakes, even when the hands tremble, even when fear clings to the edge of every step forward. Because you are no longer ruled by fear. You have made contact with something deeper than fear, deeper than shame, deeper than survival. You have made contact with yourself, not the ideal, not the image, but the fractured, tender, remembering self. The self that knows what was lost and still dares to love what remains. So now, you walk differently, not because you are healed, but because you are honest. Not because the void is gone, but because you no longer fear it. You carry it with you. You speak from it. And in doing so, you discover the void is not emptiness. It is origin. It is power. It is voice. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And that is enough. That is everything.